Hey, good morning, church. Good to see everybody. Something's different up here. I can't quite put my finger on it, but something's different about this stage today. I was asked if I'm going to preach from the stage. No, I'm not. So, kids, before I forget, kids' sermon notes. If you did not pick those up, they're back in a basket back there. But fill out the kids' sermon notes, bring them up to me. I've got a prize box for you at the end of worship. And so if you don't have that, you can go back and get that in the foyer. It's always fun to see what they do. It's always surprising. So anyway, it's just been so much fun this summer to see the kids. And so kids, for today's sermon notes, since it's Father's Day, what I want you to do is draw a picture of what you like to do with your dad or your grandpa, or just if there's a cool guy that's special to you, just draw what you like to do with that guy. That's going to be part of the sermon notes today. So, one of my favorite places to go is Yosemite National Park in California. Now, I've been there several times. This is a photo of Half Dome. It's one of the most famous landmarks in Yosemite. It's a quartz monolith. It's just a solid quartz rock, 4,600 feet above the valley, that's kind of cut in half. And so as you can see, the back side is sort of smooth and rounded, and the front is sheared away. The front is just a cliff face. I climbed Half Dome back in my 20s. There is a trail on that back side, that rounded side. The final 400 feet of that trail is nothing more than cables strung along metal posts that are drilled into the rock. And you wear gloves to hang on to the cables, and you definitely want to hang on to the cables because there's a lot of this. It's 45 degrees. That's how steep a lot of this is. And I've read that 10 people have fallen to their deaths on that trail despite the cables being there. And on my way up, I had to go outside the cable a couple times because there were people paralyzed. They were hanging on to the cable and they were just paralyzed by the vertigo-inducing angles on that trail. And so they were afraid to go up, they were afraid to go down, and so they were just kind of stuck there. And so I had to go outside and around them. But I did, and I got to the top, and I was resting near the edge up on top, a safe distance from the cliff edge, but just kind of soaking in the spectacular views. And I was kind of proud of myself because I feel like I'd earned that view. I mean, it's a hike just to get to the dome, let alone climb up the backside. And so I was just sitting there just enjoying the view of the valley, and then I looked down, and I saw something that at first my brain it could not decipher what I was seeing. And then I figured it out. It was fingers coming up over the side of the cliff. And then these two climbers pulled themselves up over the cliff edge in front of me. They had just scaled the cliff side of Half Dome. That's 2,000 vertical feet. I mean, the technical skill and the physical endurance and the courage or the insanity to spider up that sheer rock wall it's incomprehensible to me. And some of them even free solo. There's no ropes. It's just their fingers and their toes. And if they miss a hold, or if the rock that they're gripping somehow gives way, or anything goes wrong, they're going to fall to their certain death. Now, the most famous climbing routes in the park are on another mountain called El Capitan. And there's a place in the valley where you can park and you can watch the climbers go up El Cap. And some spend the night like halfway up that mountain, that climb. And so at night you can see their headlights up on El Cap. And so if they're spending the night, they have a little hammock like that is there's bolts that are hammered into the rock, and they hang their hammock off of those bolts. And so the bottom of their little tent is just hanging out over empty air. So these climbers obviously are trusting in the solidity of the granite that's holding those anchors and those cables. This is a piece of El Capitan that I picked up on my last trip out there, and I keep it in my office. But I just want to just show you this to put that image of solid rock, to put that image in your mind. And I'm just going to keep it here in front of us on the podium, because today, as we open up the Sermon on the Mount, we're going to hear Jesus tell us this is the sort of people we should be. Rock, solid, dependable people that others can trust in. So, Sermon on the Mount, chapters 5 through 7 of Matthew. As we've already said, in Matthew chapter 5, Jesus is opening up several commands from the Old Testament. And he says, these are good. These are from God. But he's going to change how we view them, because we tend to view them and use them in the wrong way. Now, we said before, a law sets a minimum standard of conduct. And what people were doing in Jesus' time, and what we still do, is we treat those commands from God like a fence line. And so long as we stay inside the fence, then we're complying, then we're obeying, and we tell ourselves, well, God must like us because we're staying inside the fence, we're following the rules. But just like a cow will crane its neck through the barbed wire to get as much of the grass on the other side as they can, we like to push the boundaries, don't we? We like to get as much as we can, to get away with everything that we can. Or we don't indulge in certain behaviors only because the rules make it difficult for us. Well, if that's why we're staying inside the fence, that doesn't make us good people. Just because we're inside the fence doesn't make us good people. What it makes us is not much different than livestock inside a fence. Because remember, these laws are from the good God. And they reflect his love for us and what's best for us and how to thrive within his good design for us. That's the reason that God gives us all these rules and restrictions in Scripture. So rather than push out to the fence line and see how much we're allowed to get away with, in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus turns that perspective inside out and says we should be viewing those laws as a door into the heart of God, who gave us those laws. We should be seeking to follow them as completely as possible, wholeheartedly, to get to the center of where that law comes from, to explore everything that these may call us to do or to learn or to let go of. Because when we take that approach, then we start discovering a new richness in our relationships, both with God and with other people. Then we're even more blessable. Then we enjoy even more what we're supposed to enjoy as disciples of Christ. And so all of the laws that Jesus is going to be opening up in the Sermon on the Mount come down to those two relationships, our relationship with God and our relationship with others. And what we're pursuing is, what Jesus is leading us to is, how can we make those relationships as good as possible? That's always been the intent. The Ten Commandments, that's what they were about. Making our relationship with God and with others the best they can possibly be. Here's how Jesus sums up those commands. Matthew 22:36. Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment, and the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself." All of the law and the prophets hang on those two commandments. So rather than try to stray as far out as we can to the fence line to see what's the least we can possibly do and still be cool with God, Jesus turns us towards what's the spirit, what is the heart behind those laws? How can we most fully and wholeheartedly love God and our neighbors? So we've already followed Jesus in Matthew 5 as he's led us into a series of case studies to show us what he's trying to do for us. And so he's taken that approach about, let's see what's at the heart of this. And he's taught us about the do not murder command and the do not commit adultery. And instead of assuming that if we have not actually committed either of those, we're okay with God, Jesus turns us around to explore what's in our hearts that could even lead us to those sorts of sins. And so he traces how anger can become murder, the devaluing of another person to the point of murder, and how lust can branch into these sinful directions. He says you need to address those emotions and those desires before they take a sinful turn. So here's the next case study. Jesus uses to challenge us to reboot our thinking. It's Matthew 5:33. Again, you've heard that it was said to the people long ago, do not break your oath, but fulfill to the Lord the vows that you have made. Now, unlike do not murder and do not commit adultery, this is not a direct quote from the Ten Commandments, but it does have, I think, a clear connection to this commandment. Exodus 27, you must not misuse the name of the Lord your God. The Lord will not let you go unpunished if you misuse his name. Now, this goes beyond OMG. This is not just mentioning God in an irreverent way. This is any time we associate God's name with something that is inconsistent with his character. Or when we attempt to use God in a manipulative way for our own purposes. So what Jesus is addressing is how God's name was being invoked in a deceptive way in vows or promises. Moses singled that out multiple times in the Mosaic Law too. This is what he says in Leviticus 19:11. Do not steal, do not lie, do not deceive one another, do not swear falsely by my name and so profane the name of your God. I am the Lord. I want you to notice in that little passage there, what else is bundled with this? There's stealing, there's lying, and there's deceiving. All those have the same motivation. And so they were making vows for the same reason. They did not intend to keep those vows, or they're making vows that were deceptive for the same ends, to get things or to manipulate people. But they were using God's name in those dishonest schemes. Now, to make a vow in God's name was not on its own sinful. I mean, here's why they were doing that. Hebrews 6:16. People swear by someone greater than themselves, and the oath confirms what's said and puts an end to all argument. So if someone puts their hand on a Bible and they raises their right hand and they swear by God, that's supposed to give legitimacy to what is said, because it's inviting God into this agreement, or it's invoking God to be a witness. It's saying that this promise I'm making is as upright and trustworthy as God himself is. And of course, God is absolutely holy. So the ancient Israelites would validate their promises on his name or things associated with God. So for instance, 1 Kings 8:31, if someone wrongs another person and is required to take an oath of innocence in front of your altar in this temple, Lord, then hear from heaven and judge between your servants, the accuser and the accused. Punish the guilty as they deserve. Acquit the innocent because of their innocence. So they would vow, they would go to the temple before the altar and they would vow to the truth of what they said because they were saying it in God's house. So they were inviting him not only to be a witness, but to be a judge. Basically saying, if I'm lying, then please God, punish me. The problem became that some people were not wholeheartedly telling the truth. They had that, reach outside the fence line, push the edge attitude. So they started to use some ambiguous language in their vows. They did not promise in the name of God, but they invoked lesser things that were associated with God. They still gave the veneer of religious piety. So they would invoke the temple, or they would invoke the altar. And really, it was a way for them to wiggle out of a deal if it went bad for them. Because they would say, well, I didn't swear by God when I told you that. And so their thinking was, because it was a lower grade object that they invoked, they felt less obligated to keep that promise. It became a game of loopholes. And here's how ridiculous it became. Jesus talks about this when he's condemning the Pharisees in Matthew 23. This is what the Pharisees were doing. Woe to you, blind guides! You say, if anyone swears by the temple, it means nothing. But anyone who swears by the gold of the temple is bound by that oath. You blind fools. Which is greater, the gold or the temple that makes the gold sacred? You also say, if anyone swears by the altar, it means nothing. But if anyone who swears by the gift on the altar is bound by that oath, you blind men. Which is greater, the gift or the altar that makes the gift sacred? Therefore, anyone who swears by the altar swears by it and by everything on it. And anyone who swears by the temple swears by it and by the one who dwells in it, which is God. And anyone who swears by heaven swears by God's throne and by the one who sits on it, who is God. I mean, that all sounds ridiculous to us, and it is. They were keeping their options open by keeping God nearby in their oaths, but not too close. So they were using things associated with God's name and character to manipulate and convince others. But doing that really meant they did not want God to be a witness to what was happening. Don't invoke God. Let's invoke something that kind of sounds like God. So they're borrowing God's name. They're borrowing God's brand, but they're not at all behaving like God's people. They're invoking God's name or things associated with God while doing things that God would never be associated with. Now, this ranking system of oaths, this scale that they developed of how accountable they had to be to the promises that they made, I mean, it does sound ridiculous to us. It's sort of like, crossing your fingers behind your back before you say it. But we do the same thing. We still do the same thing. If you made an agreement with someone and then that person did not keep his end of the bargain, and you're complaining to someone about that, what are the questions that you get asked? Well, did he just say he would do it? Or did you shake hands? Did you get that in writing? Did you get that notarized with witnesses? Did he put up collateral? Did you have your lawyer read that agreement? Did you see? We have the same sort of graduated system of how enforceable something is too, don't we? And we know that despite all of that, lawyers can still blow through non-disclosure agreements and non-compete clauses, and they can bend laws, and they can hide in the fine print, and they can leverage loopholes. I'm sorry, I don't know if there's any lawyers in here. I'm sorry. We love you still. That's how the world operates though, isn't it? But Jesus tells his people, no. No, not us. This is what he says to us, the people in his kingdom. You've also heard our ancestors were told, you must not break your vows. You must carry out the vows that you make to the Lord. But I say, do not make any vows. Do not say by heaven, because heaven is God's throne. Do not say by the earth, because the earth is his footstool. Do not say by Jerusalem, for Jerusalem is the city of the great king. Do not even say by my head, for you can't turn one hair white or black. Just say a simple, yes, I will, or no, I won't. Anything beyond this is from the evil one. So Jesus dismantles this whole system of manipulation and loopholes and ambiguity. He says, don't hedge your promises. Don't drag God's name into your dealings as if you can tell God what to do. The bottom line is, everything belongs to God, and that's supposed to include you. God's a witness to all of your dealings, whether you invite him in or not. And everything that you hope to gain in a deal, it already belongs to God, not to you. And like it or not, he's going to judge you for how you keep your promises. So stop playing these games. We as God's people know we are made to be God's image bearers on earth. We're to show others what his character, what our Creator's character is like. And we know that God is always faithful. He's always trustworthy. He is solid rock. So that's what we should be too. And that's what others should be able to count on in Christians, period. And you know what? That's easy to say, but sometimes really difficult to live out. Honesty, integrity, it can be so hard to stick to. I'm going to share one story about that, and then we're going to be done this morning. The story is a little children's book called The Empty Pot. The author was Demi. I'm going to read The Empty Pot to you. A long time ago in China, There was a boy named Ping who loved flowers. And anything he planted burst into bloom. Up came flowers and bushes and even big fruit trees as if by magic. Everyone in the kingdom loved flowers too. They planted them everywhere and the air smelled like perfume. The emperor loved birds and animals, but flowers most of all. And he tended his own garden every day. But the emperor was very old, and he needed to choose a successor to the throne. Who would his successor be? And how would the emperor choose? Because the emperor loved flowers so much, he decided to let the flowers choose. So the next day, a proclamation was issued, and all the children in the land were to come to the palace, and there they would be given special flower seeds by the emperor. Whoever can show me their best in a year's time, he said, will succeed me to the throne. Well, this news created great excitement throughout the land. Children from all over the country swarmed to the palace to get their flower seeds. And all the parents wanted their children to be chosen emperor. And all the children hoped they'd be chosen too. When Ping received his seed from the emperor, he was the happiest child of all. He was sure he could grow the most beautiful flower. So Ping filled the flower pot with rich soil. He planted the seed in it very carefully, and he watered it every day. He couldn't wait to see it sprout and grow and blossom into a beautiful flower. Day after day passed, but nothing grew in his pot. And Ping was very worried. He put new soil into a bigger pot, and then he transferred the seed into the rich black soil. Another 2 months he waited, and still nothing happened. By and by, the whole year passed. Spring came, and all the children put on their best clothes to greet the emperor. They rushed to the palace with their beautiful flowers, eagerly hoping to be chosen. Ping was ashamed of his empty pot. He thought the other children would laugh at him because for once he couldn't get a flower to grow. His clever friend ran by holding a great big plant. "Ping," he said, "you're not really going to the emperor with an empty pot, are you? Couldn't you grow a great big flower like mine?" "I've grown lots of flowers better than yours," Ping said. "It's just a seed that won't grow." Ping's father overheard this and said, "You did your best, and your best is good enough to present to the emperor." So holding the empty pot in his hands, Ping went straight away to the palace. Now the emperor was looking at the flowers slowly, one by one. How beautiful all the flowers were. But the emperor was frowning and did not say a word. And finally he came to Ping. Ping hung his head in shame, expecting to be punished. And the emperor asked him, "Why did you bring an empty pot?" And Ping started to cry and replied, I planted the seed you gave me and I watered it every day, but it didn't sprout. I put it in a better pot with better soil, but still it didn't sprout. I tended it all year long, but nothing grew. So today I had to bring an empty pot without a flower. It was the best I could do. When the emperor heard these words, a smile slowly spread over his face. And he put his arms around Ping. Then he exclaimed to one and all, "I have found him. I have found the one person worthy of being emperor. Where you got your seeds from, I do not know. For the seeds that I gave you had all been cooked. So it was impossible for any of them to grow. I admire Ping's great courage to appear before me with the empty truth, and now I reward him with my entire kingdom and make him emperor of all the land." And then this is the last page of the book with Emperor Ping riding his chariot. So in Ping, the emperor found a solid rock sort of heart that could always be trusted, even when it was difficult, even when it didn't feel successful, even if honesty made him look foolish, even when everybody else gave him excuses not to be. That's the sort of people that Jesus is forming in his kingdom. And it all comes back to this, Luke 6:31. Just as you want others to do for you, do the same for them. In all your relationships with others, whether it's a friend or someone that you hire to do a job, the whole network of our society depends on each other. I mean, we want the truth. We want to be able to trust a promise. We want to be able to depend on those people to do what they say. And if that's what you want from others, if that's what you expect, then that's what you need to be to them. Be those dependable, solid rock, yes or no people that everybody else can trust. Because, church, this is not an exaggeration. Everybody is depending on your integrity. If you're not honest, there's places where the rock in Yosemite is not good. Climbers call it rotten rock. It's where a little crack, a little fissure has started, and the water gets in there, and ice gets in there, and it starts expanding, and it starts breaking it out, and pretty soon everything around there is just rotten. It can't be trusted. So the climbers avoid those sections. When your ethics are shifty, that influences everybody around you. That forces them to either compensate for you or become more like you. And everything around you in your office or your family or your team starts to become more unstable. Maybe you've been in countries like this where the whole fabric of society has just started to erode. Don't be the crack in the rock. Don't be the weakness that makes everything else start to crumble. Solid rock. Yes or no, period. Everyone should be able to depend on us, on Christ Church, for that. That's our lesson for this morning. We're going to stay seated for our song.